Today, Airline's debate team is going to teach you guys about flowing in a policy debate round. So, flowing is just the system of note-taking within the round. You're going to want to use legal size paper, which is 8.5 by 11, and then I would recommend you guys to use two different colors, one color for the affirmative and one color for the negative. So, you're going to have different papers for the advantages the affirmative team brings up and different papers for the off-case arguments the negative team brings up. So for example, the affirmative has two advantages, global warming and the economy. You're going to have two different flows or two different pieces of paper for the economy and global warming arguments. And then let's say the negative brings up the court's counterplan. You're going to have a separate piece of paper for the court's counterplan arguments. So the first thing you want to do is label your flows. So the first advantage is the economy advantage, and then the second advantage is global warming. So you can either label this at the top right corner, top left, bottom right, bottom left. It doesn't really matter, whatever you prefer. I tend to do it at the bottom, but it doesn't really matter. So then they're going to start with the 1AC. So this is how you would flow. So they're going to read their first piece of evidence. So you want to write down the tagline, the author's name, and then maybe the warrants of the card if you can. Warrants are just the reasons why the tagline is true. So let's say the tagline is, the economy is at slow growth now. That's the tagline. So the economy is in slow growth right now. And the author is Ross 17. So now you have the tagline, the author, and that's good, but you want to try to write the warrants of the card. So let's say they say, because unemployment rates are down. So that's one warrant. Then I prefer to draw a line just to signify that that's the end of that card. And now you want to leave at least this much of space between the first card and the next card that they read, so you have enough room to answer their arguments. So let's say the next card is, a slow econ growth leads to an economic collapse. And that's Jan 18. So then you write the warrants of their card, and then draw a line, and then move on to the next card. So this is why we use legal size paper, because you're gonna run out of room. And then, so now when it's the 1NC's turn for the on-case arguments, you will do the same thing. Write the tagline, author's name, Arthur 17, warrants, next card. Okay? And then you want to leave that much space. So now, before your next speech, you can quickly write down answers to that card. So you're like, the economy's at slow growth now. No tax plan increase econ growth. So now you'll be able to answer their card, and you had room to write it. That's why you want to leave space. Line by line is going to be one of the most important things in your speeches. So line by line is just answering the other team's arguments in the order that they brought them up. So however you've written them down on the flow is how you're going to answer them. So it's very easy to write them down for the judge and for your opponents. So for example, they say the economy is at a slow growth right now, but actually we say that the tax plan is going to increase the amount of economic growth. That's the answer to their first argument. Then you go down to the second one. They say a slow economic growth leads to an economic collapse, but we say that slow economic growth is still economic growth. So any growth is going to ensure that we're not going to have an economic collapse. So that's how you would answer all of their arguments going down the flow. You can also use what is called as analytics, and those are just arguments that you create on the spot that you don't have evidence to. So any answers you have to their arguments don't always have to be carded. Like, you can come up with something that makes sense and that is carried out throughout the round, even though you don't have a card for it. So just keep that in mind. Those are actually really important. So flowing is really important whenever you are in any round, because if you don't catch all their arguments, you're bound to drop something. And when you drop an argument, that means that you didn't respond to it. So if you drop an argument that's really bad, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you answer every argument in some way. And then if the other team drops an argument, you want to make sure to call that out and say they dropped this argument, which means we should be winning on this flow because they've conceded. Things like that. So flowing is going to be really important. So you want to practice flowing, come up with ways to shorthand, I guess. So for increase, draw an arrow up; decrease, draw an arrow down. Things like that. For economy, use econ. For immigrants, just use a capital I. You want to get familiar with the terms that you'll be hearing a lot, and just come up with some abbreviations that you and your partner will be able to understand, so you guys can flow faster and read each other's flows as well. And so at the end of a round, what I've always been taught is you want to take your flows and then fold them in half, and then you're going to write the round, the judge, what side you were on, if you were affirmative or negative, what arguments were brought up in the round. So for example, the advantages, the off-case arguments, and then any judge critiques, because you want to have these to look back on, and so then you can revise some of the way you answer things, and so you'll always have your flows, and then you'll have your critiques that you'll be able to use. And also, you want to make sure you never want to throw away your flows. So any arguments that they make, you can create blocks to after. So after a tournament, you can go home and then make all of the 2AC blocks you need to answer these arguments. So if they're brought up again, you won't be caught off guard and you'll have answers to them. So flowing is obviously a really important technique in flowing is going to be really important in all of your rounds, whether they send you a speech doc or not. You want to be able to understand spreading and be able to catch it and write it down fast. And spreading, just if you didn't know, is just talking really, really fast. As you get higher and higher, people will start spreading and they'll read really, really fast, and you want to be able to catch down everything they say. So one way to get used to spreading is listening to videos but increasing the speed. So if you're listening to a specific podcast, you can just increase the speed, like the words per minute, and then try to see how much you can write down. That's a good way to do it. Just things like that. You want to get used to flowing and coming up with easier ways to take notes. Thank you.